I see some names I recognize already. That's great. All right. Welcome everyone. While we do the introductions, more people can join. Welcome everyone to episode 6 of the Football for All talks. These talks are a series of webinars that we're organizing on behalf of Integrated Dreams. We are a nonprofit organization that works to promote employability, entrepreneurship, and networking of disabled people in the world of sport. This year, due to the current pandemic, we canceled our physical training, which would happen around this time of the year. And we are doing these webinars instead, which is also a good opportunity to talk to a lot of interesting people. So all of these webinars are on topics related to disability and sports and innovation. And today we're also talking to organizations that are not strictly tied to football, although there's a connection to sports and innovation obviously there, and see what they're doing to promote inclusion in and around sports. Just a note to say that these webinars are organized in collaboration with CAFE, the Center for Access to Football in Europe. They're a partner in the Football for All leadership program. And we've also had the privilege of having several of their team members, mentor participants in our program in the last 2 editions. Before introducing our speakers, also a note to say that there are live captions of this talk via Otter. There is a live streaming service link on your screen, and I also included the link in the chat if that makes it easier for everyone. And we will have a poll going on throughout the webinar. I will just launch it now, and we will come back to the results of the poll later on. I hope you can all see it. Please kindly answer those couple of questions. So the questions are: does your local club have a disability inclusive sports program that is open to people with disabilities? And the second question is, how important do you believe assistive technology is as a tool for disabled people towards a more inclusive society? So kindly answer those questions on there. We'll come back to them later. To everyone joining, you can also ask questions in the chat or in the Q&A box here on Zoom, and we'll do our best to attend to them during the conversation. If not, we'll come back to you later. So I would like to introduce our guests and give you a warm welcome. Thank you for everyone for your time joining today. We have with us Geraldine McTavish. I hope I said that correctly. Diversity and Inclusion Officer with the Gaelic Athletic Association. We have Miroslav Krogulec, who is Director Sports and Organizational Development of Special Olympics Europe and Eurasia. And we have Victoria Austin, CEO of the Global Disability Innovation Hub. So I would ask each of our speakers to give a brief introduction as to, why you're here, basically, what was your journey, or a little bit more about your organization, and then we'll kick off the discussion. So maybe Geraldine, I would kick it off to you in alphabetical order. If you don't mind.
You, Joana. Yes, that's okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Geraldine McTavish. I work as Diversity and Inclusion Officer in the Gaelic Athletic Association, so better known as GA or GA in Ireland and worldwide. Our association is Gaelic football and hurling. We also have rounders and handball. The association then works with our 2 sister organisations, which is the Ladies Gaelic Football Association, Ladies Football, and Camogie, which is a female version of hurling. And we work collaboratively with those sister organisations as well. We've been established since 1884. We cover 32 counties of Ireland. We also have overseas as well clubs. So in total, we have 1,616 clubs, and 450 of those clubs are overseas. In Europe, in Canada, in America, in Middle East. So we cover world, and every 2 years we have World Games as well as our national games here in Ireland. Our basic unit is our clubs unit. It's our structure. We're an amateur organisation. So many of our coaches, assistants, management committees are volunteers. So it's volunteer driven. And we would encourage more and more volunteerism and retention of volunteerism, but also as well as that, it's a community-based organisation, and our values are all about the community and our members. Me personally, I've been Diversity and Inclusion Officer in Croke Park over the last year. Previous to that, we have had a Diversity, Integration and Inclusion Officer for over 10 years in the Gaelic Athletic Association. So there's been many programs in the area of sport. I sit in the Community and Health Department, which covers physical activity as well as mental activities, and then policies and inclusion and diversity. We would have a very vibrant organisation who works internally and then externally, but we also would have a majority of our coaches would work on the ground at club level on inclusive initiatives. So programs like wheelchair hurling and camogie, Football for All, which is a program that's run in special schools, so for children with special needs in schools around Ireland. And then we work with a lot of all-star programs. We summer camps, inclusion programs, and also we have all-star program is a program, training program that has been created in the clubs to accommodate for any child who comes with additional needs, and they are accommodated in their local club. They can come down to their local club and play GAA like every other child in their local area. So that's kind of a snapshot of the GAA and what we represent. I think at the moment we have over 20,000 teams and probably about 300,000 members in the GAA.
That's a lot spread all over. That's great, Chair. We'll come back to some of those topics a little bit later.
Thank you.
Thanks for the intro. Mirek, I would go to you next. Tell us a little bit more about Special Olympics and yourself.
Thank you, Joana. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thanks for the invitation. And my name is Mirek Krogulec. I'm Sports Director for Special Olympics Europe and Eurasia. And sport organization for people with intellectual disabilities that has over 50 years history right now. We are the global organization present in over 200 countries around the world. Europe is 58, we call it national programs with over 500,000 participants. We offer trainings and competition for people with children and adults with intellectual disabilities in 34 sports. There are different also social programs and health programs that are offered by Special Olympics, like athletes leaders. We are based on the volunteers, like Geraldine mentioned. For Gaelic, it's exactly the same in Special Olympics. We are driven by volunteers. There are also the World Games, which we are organizing in the cycle of 4 years, Winter and Summer Games. And a part of that, there are single sports competition organized by international, national, and most importantly, local levels. I think for now, that's it. I think we can go for the further details later on about the inclusive parts and thank you for that.
Thanks, Mirek. Vicki, you come not from a sports organization, but sports was in there in the mix in the beginning of the hub. And you do a lot of work with education, innovation, etc. Tell us a little bit more about the Global Disability Innovation Hub and your work, please.
Thanks, and thanks so much for inviting me. I'm in such great company. I'm really enjoying listening to my colleagues. our organisation doesn't just work on sport now, but I used to be head of sport for the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park in East London, and also head of the Paralympic Legacy Programme. So I did kind of cut my teeth, if you like, a little bit on sport for inclusion, and I kind of have seen firsthand through working for 3 different mayors of London through 2012, before and after, the impact that sport can have on changing the lives of people who otherwise don't have opportunities to participate and engage, especially autonomously. So we did lots of things, including a programme called Motivate East, which reached about 500,000 people in East London with access to sport, disabled people. Or people with disabilities, and I think so I kind of have a passion for it, not necessarily for the elite games themselves, although it's lovely to watch, but for the opportunity that it provides for people. And we saw, you know, with our programs, everything from kind of employment outcomes right through to kind of like palpable differences in people's kind of social environments and kind of friendships and stuff. We even had a marriage on our program. But I think, you know, now, you know, what came out of London 2012 was work on disability that was quite different, and we can talk more about that. But it was led by disabled people. I use disabled people because in the UK, that's the nominated term, and that's the term respected and owned by disabled people's organisations. But I recognise it's different elsewhere. And so GDI Hub, Global Disability Innovation Hub, was born out of that legacy, really. We were set up in 2016, and we aim to build a movement for disability innovation for a fairer world. So building on the stuff that we learned from 2012, not necessarily just the physical things that were delivered. My teams looked after the built environment and the stadiums and the venues and the accessibility thereof, but actually more about the process and the way that by listening to the people who often know the answers, i.e. those people themselves that are a user of a place or a service or a thing, it can be actually simpler than you think to embed inclusion in the outcomes that we see, whether that's the built environment or the way we design our cities or employment. So for me, it's been a wonderful journey and quite a long one. I've been working in inclusion for 20 years across various European locations, but right now GDI Hub operates in 33 countries, and we have a programme of about 50 million, which sounds a lot, but it's delivered through a big partnership. And we work on assistive technology, inclusive design, and cultural participation. Hi.
Thanks, Vicki. Quick overview of that. We'll get into some of the work that you do. And the hub has a very interesting fabric in its foundation as well. So we'll get into a bit of that diversity as well moving forward. Jer, maybe I would start with you, and you did a little bit, you explained a little bit what you do, but as a diversity and inclusion officer, I know you run a lot of programs. Can you give us some examples of, because you are intricately connected, of course, to the Irish culture, but you will have also a global presence at the same time. How do you promote inclusion, not only in Ireland, but across all of those places, and you know, reaching a lot of people that don't necessarily also have a close tie with, you know, not everyone knows what hurling is or what Gaelic football is, or maybe we do, we just don't know what it's. So if you could give us a few examples of programs that you run.
Thank you, Joana. Yeah, it's great to hear Mirek and Vicki as well on their, it's great to be in their company as well. Yeah, I suppose from looking at the GA and its passion and how it's spread worldwide, it has gone with the Irish identity across the world when they moved across the world. I'm one of those people where half of my family have moved to Boston and different countries as well, where they took their culture, their tradition with them. But we also find that the sport is quite easy to pick up. With Gaelic football, it's a mixture between bouncing the ball like basketball to hand passing, and then football on the ground as well. So it is a mixture of different sports coming together. The solos are quite hard for people, but everybody manages it. You can break it down and manage it. So the sport then of hurling, the stick game, there is a lot of stick games very similar, which is rounders, similar to cricket, that we do share with other nationalities and other ethnicities. So you will find that there is a lot of collaboration across the sports, We use maybe some similar equipment to similar training, similar programs. So from a GAA's perspective, it was first of all putting a good structure in place, which was our inner strategic plan to our policies and our foundations, good structures in place where we started awareness campaigns and also communication campaigns on how we wanted programs to be developed and also to be inclusive. The GAA would have put together a GAA for All working committee, and that committee was internally and external stakeholders who came together with their expertise into the sporting organisation, worked with cultural planners, worked with different agencies to bring that to the GAA, and then from that working committee then start developing simple competitions to programs to initiatives. So we have an awareness day that we just launched in September to tie in with European Week of Sport, which was our National Inclusion Fitness Day. And that opened up our clubs to all abilities, children with special needs to wheelchair hurling, camogie. So what we try to do is the game that we have, we encourage people to play it, and then we adapt the game to the players themselves and the individuals themselves. So we've seen a huge progress in that, in our marketing, in our communication, but also as well as that on how we develop our programs. So when we start from the basic of a program now, we think of we observe, we look at the wider population, and we also consider it to people who've observed our sport and can critique our sport, and also asking people who are visually impaired, who have a disability, who are in a wheelchair, what we should do to accommodate them coming to play our game and to play their game for them as well. So it is about listening, as Vicki said, and adapting our programs.
That's great. I know you have a video to show, so let me know whenever you want to show people what wheelchair hurling is. It looks very interesting, difficult.
Very difficult.
But very, very cool. Mirek, you also have a unique approach to sports. Special Olympics is, of course, focused on intellectual disability, but you for example, the World Games are sports and a humanitarian event, focusing a lot on the health of the community. You also have something that is very unique to Special Olympics, which is the unified sports. For those listening that don't necessarily know Special Olympics very well, could you explain a little bit more about this whole philosophy behind the Special Olympics, please?
Yeah, the inclusion there, it's something which is very much in DNA of Special Olympics right now, and we can consider as inclusion in many ways: access to the venue, to acceptance in the clubs, to be invited to the community club, and to be included in the team. So in Special Olympics, we try to create an environment for every individual to feel comfortable, to feel to find a place for the equal competition. We have, let's start from that we have a system which we call divisioning, which we created to ensure that athletes on every level, which are very low level or high level, are participating in the group, which are according to the, of course, gender and age. It's like in all other sports by the quality, they are also divided by the level of the ability level, and thanks to that athletes can, let's say for 100 meters or football team, they compete with the teams or individuals exactly on the same level, so they can enjoy that competition. So we have no elite approach on the competition. Of course, we can see some athletes on the really high level and fantastic running or playing football, but at the same time, we can see how hard it is for example, athletes with Down syndrome to play football and have a perfect technique in playing football, but they will never play in the team sport with the strategy on the field, because this is beyond their capacity. And we create a different project, and one of this project, one of the initiative which we create, I'm just leading up to the unified sports that you have mentioned in introduction. We have a concept when we are pairing athletes with intellectual disability with those without disability. And this concept is based on that every person with a proper support and endorsement and created a good environment can deliver a better quality than before. And for example, in the football team, the half of the team is with disability, half is without. They train together, they play together, they're on the pitch and off the pitch. And there's a huge role of the coach to create and to make a selection of these athletes, because not all athletes with ID and not all partners, because we call them unified partners, they're ready for this concept. This is a journey which we start over 10 years ago, or even more, 15 years ago, in Special Olympics in Europe. And in all team sports, we offering this unified concept. As I said, there should be the similar ability level, similar age, because they can understand each other. And then we can see the development, the relation between athletes and partners are for the long term. The easiest way is to start it in the young age, because there is no barrier at that time. The students, not all students are ready for that. They are experienced, but they are not ready for that. So it's a very interesting concept, and it's very successful. There's a lot of conditions that we put behind this concept. And of course, the World Games you mentioned, you can see unified teams that train a couple of years together to be on that level. And for us, the most successful part of this project is if we see that this team, they understand, they support each other in every single minute, not only on the football or on the pitch, on the court, but also outside of the court. I bring with me a quick example of unified sports, and the next step after unified sports, it's the role of those who finish their career. They can do something else. And I have over 1 minute short video of one of our athletes who became Special Olympics athletes. So let's see the video. Can you Joana, show this the short video? It's 1.5 minutes, so I hope it's not too long to watch it.
No, not at all. Let me see if I can do this right.
Basically, it's athlete from Belgium, basketball player. She used to play in unified team, but she started with different sports.
Hopefully, you're seeing my screen.
Yeah, here it is.
And okay.
Ik wil graag een coach worden, omdat ik altijd opkeek naar mijn coach en mijn andere coach. En ik keek zo van, hoe doen die dat allemaal? En toen hebben zij mij gevraagd om te helpen. En na het helpen zijn we dan samen gaan leren voor coach. En dankzij haar hulp ben ik geslaagd en ben ik ook echt coach geworden.
It's great to have that opportunity, and one of our main goals is to keep adult athletes, when they sort of are not playing anymore, that they can find a role in Special Olympics, and that's very important. That's what we do.
that this is one of the examples what inclusion means, that there's a whole path for the athletes who start with the different sports, switch to different one, from the individual to team sports. When she approach and reach the certain level, she is like we. She wants to still develop, and so we try to create an offer to be unified team, and now in the coaching role. So one of the great story, there are many of them like this in Special Olympics. Of course, this is not for all athletes, the story like this, but I would like to just share with you that we are not only about sports, we are also about creating a different path for different individuals. And we might really find such story plenty around the globe.
That's great, Mirek. The development continues as not only as an athlete, but as you move through your life, you take on a different role, if you will, that can potentially go on for much longer than your athletic career, let's say. Within the organization. That's fantastic, a fantastic example. Vicky, I would move to you now and ask, you were created, as you said, as a legacy project from London 2012. You launched, if I'm not mistaken, you announced the creation of the hub in 2016. So Olympic cycle. Now we were supposed to have Tokyo 2020. We'll have Tokyo 2020 next year. From that Olympic cycle, let's say, from the last 4 years, what are the major takeaways that you bring from your portfolio of programs? Has grown. You're in many different countries. What are the major takeaways that you bring from that whole experience in this past 4 years? What bridges do you see from London 2012, where we were, to where we're going, let's say in Tokyo?
Thanks. It's a great question. It's also a really hard question. I suppose when London concluded, we felt like there had been a shift in sort of attitudes towards disability. And for me, that was it came home to me on the day the Olympic Games finished, and I walked outside of the Olympic Park in East London, which is it's a very diverse part of London, a fairly deprived part of London. And suddenly I saw this big billboard from Channel 4 that said, "Thanks for the warm-up." And I realized, I kind of realized instantly that the work and the effort had been to some degree successful, because there was a change in tone, there was a kind of a different approach. And there was a kind of way of talking about the Paralympic Games that gave some equality to the Olympic Games. And there was also a huge desire in the UK to keep the party going, right? So people wanted it to continue. They didn't want it to stop. So by the time, 2 days after that, the Paralympics had sold out. We reached more people from more countries than ever before, more TV coverage, Paralympians as heroes. Now, I completely understand that campaign and the superheroes campaign didn't meet everyone's desires, and there was some, fairly reasonable questions about, do you have to be super to be fair enough in this country, and I accept that. I also accept that not everything grew from that point on, and you could certainly look at different approaches to disability now and wonder whether, some of that change was sustained. I also know, especially with colleagues on the line from Special Olympics, that Paralympics doesn't recognise everyone. But something shifted. And it shifted because of not just that moment, that spark that Channel 4 lit, but it shifted because lots of people had worked really hard on a common mission for a long period of time. At the moment, we're doing some research. Actually, I'm doing it, so I know a bit about it, to try and map why and what happened. And there's lots of thinking around it. But broadly, there was a bold mission that said we want to be the most inclusive games ever. And then there was political leadership, and then there was a lot of technical people brought around that mission. And even those that weren't on the payroll wanted to contribute towards making that a success. And I think these are things that we see in other cases, but that kind of approach is something that we can learn a lot from right now because of the situation in which we find ourselves. So we know that, you know, currently as we experience the global pandemic that we're in, obviously Tokyo has had to be postponed for a year. Moreover, people with disabilities are experiencing a higher degree of both risk and impact from COVID-19. And I think, you know, we work a lot with countries in the global south and in lower resource settings where the ability to respond to the pandemic is both less well equipped, but also in some senses better from those countries that have experienced global pandemics before, more recently than us. And so I think us being, I'm sitting in London right now. And so, you know, what I've learned is that when you set a clear mission, when you bring on board leaders from the community that represents, by this time I mean disabled people as leaders, and that's what we have in our organisation, when you know, relax a bit and let everyone contribute towards success instead of feeling like you have to control everything yourselves, which I think sometimes is one of the problems with kind of particularly change led by big organisations. And when you kind of empower communities to be able to contribute what they know to co-creating new solutions, you can drive change. And for me, COVID is not a moment to only reflect on the negatives, though we must, of course, for sure. And it's, you know, the role of big organisations is also to address the needs of people with disabilities who are experiencing a disproportionate impact. But it's also time to kind of, like, as my dad would say, fill your boots, right? Now is the time to form the partnerships, to do the groundwork, to lay the foundations for next time that spark comes along. And so for us, one example is we're working on an assistive technology program. One of the problems with assistive technology, so 900 million people currently don't have access to the technology they need to live their lives. That's 90% of a billion people don't have access to assistive technology, by which I mean wheelchairs, hearing aids, eyeglasses, walking sticks, incontinence pads. These people are unable to live their lives fully. They're unable to have jobs, be educated, go to school, have friends, form relationships, all sorts of things. This is due to double by 2050, according to the World Health Organization. That means 2 billion people won't have access, or 90% of 2 billion people, unless we change. So we need to take about setting a mission, and we kind of have, and we need to think about how we can work together, and there's a global partnership that we help set up. But more importantly, we also need to think about what can we learn from COVID. And one of the reasons people don't have access to assistive technology is because the markets don't function in all of the countries that need to have functioning markets. So things like distributed manufacturing, by which I mean things like 3D printing and also just locally manufacturing products. Those supply chains are now being strengthened by organisations seeking to get COVID support products to the people that need them around the world. And so what we're doing is working really hard with colleagues at UCL and elsewhere, and it's a UK aid investment actually, but there are others, to kind of piggyback on that. So if we're building up distributed manufacturing channels, we know, because we're working with humanity and inclusion in refugee camps in Uganda, that 3D printing can also work for orthotics, for instance. It can also work for elements of wheelchairs, as Motivation taught us from our project in Kenya. It can also work for elements of prosthetics, although it's harder because the quality of the product needs to be stronger. But technology is improving, so let's fill our boots. Let's learn from what we know, which is dedicated mission, pooling everyone's resources, getting on board with clarity and listening to users. And then let's use the opportunity, because hope shines brightest in the dark, right?
100%. A lot of things that you said make a lot of sense. We have a question here in the chat, whether for you, Vicki, whether you have partners, I believe it's for you based on when it came in, partners interested in working with partners in Sierra Leone. So you didn't mention Sierra Leone there, you mentioned a few countries. So I don't know if you have anything that you want to say to, sorry if I don't pronounce your name correctly, Santigi Bayo Dumbuya, is asking that question.
Santigi Dumbuya, do I know you? I think, well, I know someone called Santigi and I know someone called Dumbuya, but lots of people have similar names in Sierra Leone, so I'm sorry if I've got it wrong. We work with, yeah, he's saying yeah. So we work with the Sierra Leone Urban Research Centre, and also with the Federation of the Urban and Rural Poor. We're working in Freetown in two human settlements in Dwazak, which is a large hillside settlement, and Thompson Bay, which is a small coastal settlement. And also with a community, a human settlement, for those people that don't know, is a kind of slum community where people have come to live there because essentially they have no other option in terms of where to live. So they're living without kind of the rights of kind of security of tenure, and often without services like toilets and water. But in cities like Freetown, up to 70% of the population live in settlements like this. So this is not an unusual place to live or to be. We're working there because we believe community-led solutions can also be successful. And actually what we found working in Freetown is that a lot of people get their assistive technology from informal markets. So when governments are planning how to spend money on assistive technology, they don't really take account of informal market sellers. So that could be someone who walks around selling products. It could be someone who's selling slightly outside of the formal market, possibly without regulations. But up to 70% of people are getting their assistive technology from there. And they often also get drugs and medicine from there too. And in Freetown, this is kind of compounded by the fact that the government in Sierra Leone makes strong commitments and has a strong policy framework, but it's difficult to implement because of the resource limitations. So yes, I'd love to know more Santigi Dumbuya, but we do work there, and actually my PhD is there, so I love it.
That's great. Small world after all. You talked a lot about community and community-led projects that are more effective. We've learned a lot of those who are reading about, as you said, projects or initiatives to combat COVID in some places around the world that are working pretty well, and even though they have less resources because of that sort of project. In a sports setting, and I would shift back to Jer and Mirek, you, both your organizations work a lot in the community. It's part of the reason why your projects are successful, I would say. Can you share a little bit with us, going back to Jer? And also there's a question here by someone, I think from India, saying that as an inclusion officer, what problems do you face from communities, and which do you focus on? More livelihood, education, health, and fitness? So I would shoot this question back to you, Jer, and Mirek as well, in terms of tying these projects that relate to disabled sport, but not more so on the community side and on inclusion side, and less so with the focus on competition, even though they can coexist, of course.
Yeah, thanks, Joana. Yeah, and maybe just to answer that question about the community and the involvement, I think it goes back to the systematic process where children, adults with special needs for many, many years have been either sent away to homes or special schools, or had their own school to go to or own department to go to. They weren't in mainstream schools. So here in Ireland, that whole teaching and learning has changed completely. So society has changed, and every child is in mainstream if you have a disability or don't have a disability. I use the word abilities to see the ability of children and to see the abilities of adults, and that's what we promote in the community, but we also promote through our sport. And that positive spin and that positive education awareness that there's no stigma behind having, you're not different because you have been born with a disability. Teach the individual and focus on the individual. And we've coached our coaches and our tutors and members in our communities, to our volunteers, to see the abilities of that child or that individual, and to see the person first. And maybe that is the humanity coming out from our UN Convention, the rights of children with disability, to all the other policies that the countries are starting to implement. So I think it's back to the systematic structures who've started to change, our Department of Education to our Departments of Sports, to now what we've seen is a societal change, and our volunteers are leading it at our community level. So I suppose the challenges are the systematic design of buildings, that people didn't incorporate, or sports grounds that didn't incorporate people with disabilities before. Now they are, and all the planning and all the designs of any sporting facilities that we design now has the broader view of everybody in the community. The other challenges is around language, words, that terminology that was acceptable 20 years ago and is not acceptable now. So they're the challenges, but also the education of there's a fear. We spend a lot of time coaching, so there is a fear of coaching somebody with a disability, of saying the wrong thing to a child who has a special need. And it's once a person goes and helps that person, they get past that fear, or the fear of saying something wrong. I always say to any coach or any person I meet, try it. It's like when you're trying to teach a child to try a vegetable for the first time, or a broccoli or a carrot that they don't like. It's giving them that, just try it. That's all I'm asking. And if you don't want to do it again, you don't have to. So it is about teaching that of do try it, do. So I suppose we would find those challenges of maybe accessibility to the sports grounds, to the buildings, and then the older generation stigma that is there, that we're trying to now help them deal with that as well, and use different terminology. But when it comes to challenges of delivering a program, we have seen them go from strength to strength.
Thanks, Jer. That's really good to hear. Mirek, I know you do a lot of work with the...
This was... Geraldine covered many things which are really relevant to us as well in our group, and I just can echo that Europe is so diverse, and we still have a different system. There are many institutions, and especially which we're talking about the East and West Europe, it's still a bit different. EU structure changed this in the school system. There are inclusive schools in majority of European countries. I would like to say all of them, but not all of them yet. They are not ready. The school is a first point of contact for us in many cases. The communities are not, in many countries, they are not well developed yet, and they are not ready to accept people with disability yet. Especially if you're talking about East Europe, it's still an ongoing process. And we are working on that very hard. And one of the reasons is that the next World Games will be in Russia. And one of the legacy of this World Games would be that the perception and attitudes toward people with disability, in this case, in intellectual disability, will change across Russia, not in the host region, but also across the country. So this is somehow linked to the London, but I would not compare these two games for now at all. The second point that Geraldine mentioned is coaches. 100% agreed. We need more coaches which are prepared in the communities mainly, because people are still afraid touching clubs, for example, the let's say football clubs. When we approaching different clubs and the CSR or social projects, they said, with pleasure, we can cooperate you, but we are not ready to work. We don't know, we have no experience, but we are delivering in outlets. We say, just make it slower, longer. It takes more time. So this shows us that the communities in many cases are not ready because they never try. There is no culture. And again, I'm touching the part of Central East Europe. We can really see a difference in community approach towards people with disability for today.
All of you have mentioned a little bit of this. Of course, there is the way people view disability is different from culture to culture, of course. We are working towards an ideal, which is for that stigma to be less and less, and to be more the focus on inclusion. We are now living, of course, in a context that is even more challenging. Vicki, you've touched upon this already. do you think working across so many different countries and some interesting places where maybe there are other challenges there, do you think we will come out of this pandemic? Is there a risk that we come out of it, with a wider divide between a world that has access to assistive technology, to prosthetics, to to wheelchairs and so on? I know you have some projects on these topics as well, and those countries that don't. Are we running the risk of instead of reducing that stigma, widening the gap, because COVID is obviously has more impact in those who are already vulnerable? Since you have this overview, such you're based in London, as you said, and you're working in 33 different countries and very diverse continents. What is your view on this, and what do you see? I mean, moving forward, what do you see as the key points we should tackle to avoid this?
So yes, the answer is yes. There is definitely a risk that we come out of this worse, of course, and so if you think about that too much, if I spend too much time focused on that, I find it hard to take the next step. So what I try to do, and I live with 2 mental health conditions for myself, so this for me is like, it's a good question, because every day, I have to remember, it's what a colleague of mine, Dave Morris, said. He was the mayor's advisor on the Paralympics, and he was an activist for years. He unfortunately passed just before the Paralympics, and it was reminded to me in a book that was written by a colleague on inclusive design recently, and it says, changing the world isn't easy, but we must keep trying. Right? So every day we have to do really hard stuff. And I suppose, just while I'm on quotes, the thing that really kind of energized me was listening to Kamala Harris give her opening speech, where, she said, we the people have the power to build a better future. I've written it on the wall, it's right there. Because nothing will mitigate that challenge of things being worse than they were before, more than us taking action towards, no matter how small, towards the solution of better. And I do think there's a possibility of better. And there's an amazing blog written by a member of my team about how, she's an expert in inclusive design, and she was saying, a lot of people have for years, disabled people for years have been saying, let's make things accessible virtually, let's have tools and materials which are easier to use and cheaper and more available. And now you see companies like, for example, Microsoft, who are doing a great job on making their software more accessible. We're using captioning today, which I know there's a plugin and stuff, but essentially it's free. It's not perfect, but it's better than we had before. And I suppose, we have the power to make this better. There's also some really big lessons we should learn. So back to Sierra Leone and also Liberia. So our research tells us that disabled people experience the Ebola pandemics differently. The information that was given wasn't given in the same way. Stigma got worse in some areas, but the intention was to build back better, and that economic recovery hasn't always been the case. So there's plenty of examples for us to point to of where we have the opportunity to learn, but also we are a small part of a big journey, but we each have the opportunity to spend our days trying to generate a more positive change in the world. And I can't promise that it's going to be perfect and possible, but I think for me anyway, if I just think about the next step, then that's the way I get out of bed in the morning and keep trying.
Makes sense. Jer, what do you think we should focus on and try to keep moving things forward as we come out of, hopefully, we don't know when, we know it will happen, we just don't know when. As we come out of this context that we're in, what would you say, and maybe the conversation before on, involving the community, etc. How important is that to keep moving things forward and keep that change going and avoid the risk of taking some steps backwards?
Yeah, I think thanks, John, and yeah, I definitely agree with Vicki and with Mirek there on being positive. What I've found is that the COVID has taught us all what it's like to have a disability and be locked up or be in your home or not be able to get access or not able to see your family or not able to see your go to your sporting activities. So I think a humbly experience for everyone is what this COVID has taught us all, that this is what people with special needs from disability with intellectual have been dealing with since they were born. And I think this is something that has resonated with me, and that understanding of there, unless someone helps me and we stick in this together. There's a beautiful Irish saying called Níneart le cur le chéile, and that Gaelic saying means that, and I wrote it down because it's a Gaelic word, I know it off by heart, but in English, there is no strength without working together. And it's something my mother passed on to me for years and years, and we actually use it in my first GA club that I played Gaelic football for. It was our logo that we put on our top, and maybe that poignant that it was something that I always believed in and became my mission. That's how we do, and that's how I get up every day, Vicki, and try to progress through. I might not be able to help everyone, but I can help one person. And I think if you have that intuition and that personal strive, someone has helped you along the way, so you're returning that favor. And I found that understanding through COVID, that now we understand the eyes, we see through the eyes of maybe many children and adults who haven't had the same privileges as we have. And I try to explain that to people I work with, and that I want you to remember this when you meet somebody who has been in a different, has a different ability or disability. So I think that's the first one. And then the second one, Vicki had said about the social responsibility and the educational piece. Without education, without putting it into people's understanding, language, translate, people don't understand. And I think for me, in the Gaelic Athletic Association, we've started to look at translating a lot of our programs and our designs, so we can share with other nationalities and ethnicities, and we can actually share across the world. And that's something where we're helping, not just in our own country, but in other countries.
Absolutely. Mirek, same question to you.
Yeah, there's so many good things said before me, so it's hard to add. I definitely would echo the languages. Europe is 40 languages, so it's a huge issue for this region. As such, one more thing is an easy language to talk. A lot of documents, a lot of materials should be converted to easy language. Like we have rules, for example, sports rules, which has been converted to easy language, or some materials has been converted to be understandable by people, accessible by the people which are primary group of this material. So that's the one thing. Talking about the future, of course we are positive. Of course we are positive. If you meet any person with disability, if you talk to these people, they are most inspiring people. If you would bring to this panel person with ID, we are trying to always bring some people with us to such discussion, because they are unpredictable and always very positive in such discussion, and you never know what you can get. Like, you know, from the famous movie, The Box with Chocolate. So we are still planning our competition, repeating that competitions drive the movement. This is something which is hope for our athletes. They are preparing, they are training to be visible, to have a target. So competitions, if you look at our plan for the next year, we have a plan, we have a competitions plan. We don't know if this plan can be implemented fully, but at least athletes, they know that they can prepare for something, for specific events. And there is the light in the tunnel, and in the second half of next year, or in 22 or in 23. So there is something in this tunnel for every athletes in Special Olympics.
Thank you, guys. We're running out of time, but definitely a lot of things have been said that keep me optimistic. We're optimistic here at the organization, always. We're taking this opportunity also to reflect on several things, and a lot of what you guys said resonate with our discussions and with the discussions we've been having with a lot of partners. A lot that you've been saying also is shared by previous sessions, and I'm sure it's a good bridge also to the next session, which is more an advocacy, I would say hardcore advocacy session. They're all about inclusion and equality, of course, and pushing for change. And this is a good bridge for this conversation, is a good bridge for that. On my part, from what you all said, I would say that in that optimistic context, we should focus on keep pushing every day, take the next step, keep pushing for change, involve our communities, involve disabled people as much as possible. That's what we do at the organization. Try to push more representation, essentially, of the disabled population in our case in sports, but all across the board. It's a fifth of the world population, and more or less, and they're not close to being represented in sports and beyond. Unfortunately, we don't have time to address all of the questions. We'll try to get to them later. I would want, before rounding up and giving everyone the opportunity to make some closing remarks, I would go back to our poll and see where we are in our replies. Let me see if I can share these results. Hopefully everyone can see that. So we had asked if local clubs have disability inclusive sports programs. Actually, I'm positively surprised. The answer is 63% yes and 37% no, which is good. So it seems like there's a lot of important work being done out there. The second question, in regards to assistive technology and how important this is for disabled people as a tool to a more inclusive society. No surprise there. I mean, it's obviously an important tool as the technology takes on a more important role in our lives, especially now during confinement. I mean, Jer said something that was, I think, right on point. We're feeling the isolation that we're feeling, in my view, is can relate to a lot of disabled people who are confined to their home, if they have if they have a home, if they're not in an institution, and that's I would say you're 100% accurate in making that point. So I would ask all of you on the panel if you'd like to add, based on these results of the poll and on our conversation here, what would you say are your major takeaways from the conversation? And maybe I would start with Mirek now and change a little bit the order here. Gentlemen first.
Okay, so again, thanks for the invitation to this panel, to this discussion. I'm positive, surprised also with this poll, and quick comment from my side. This inclusion. I was recently attended one of the conference, EAFDN conference, and I was listening different presentation and discussion, and from all of the participants, I could hear that this is the most busy time. The last 8 months, it's the most busy time for all the CSR and clubs. they ever had experience, they have ever experienced so far. So it means that the group of the which are dealing with our targets, with all social projects are extremely dedicated to their work. And this is optimistic for us that after this period of COVID, we have a better structure, better prepared infrastructure, and with a lot of new initiatives ready in place. So that's the message I would like to leave after this panel as a conclusion. So with a more positive.
Thanks a lot, Mirek. Vicki, maybe I would shoot to you now and ask you. You know, we've talked about a lot of different things. I know we didn't mention a lot of the projects that the Hub is working on as well. I shared in the chat the link to your latest impact report so that people could have a look. I would also share it later via email to everyone who attended and those who couldn't, so they can have a look. But I would also ask you, it's very, very difficult to sum up all of the topics that we touch upon here, but if you could tell us what you take from the conversation today. Thank you.
It's a really difficult question. I think it's really hard not to rely on kind of others who are much more inspirational and global leaders than me. And I suppose then I'll do that, which is, I think that it's true that Barack Obama had the words of Dr. King in his Oval Office on a rug. He had a tapestry, and it said, the arc or the history of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I have to believe this every day. But also, to borrow from an American kind of thinker, what Audre Lorde taught us is that you have to also look after your own well-being. So these are the two things. Like, let's take steps towards justice every day, but let's make sure we also look after ourselves. Otherwise, we won't have a sustainable long-term future of social justice and campaigning for change.
Great, thank you. Chair, over to you.
Wow, I mimic both of Vicki and Mirek's. I had the privilege of working with Special Olympics Ireland, so I'm maybe that's why me and Mirek our thinking is very similar, and same with Vicki. For me, first of all, to thank the organisation. You're doing great work in what you're doing. I got introduced to you through the social media, so it's great to have that exposure and to connect. Probably what I would say from my point of view is that to everybody who's on here and from the poll, congratulations on all the work you're doing, because you're doing something right, and we're seeing that from the poll, and please continue to do your work because it is making a difference. And the second thing is that you work to your own strengths, and you work to what you're able to control and you're able to deliver. Sometimes you don't have to look outside your organization. It's someone in your community, or it's someone. So what I try to do is survey or do research around who's close to me, who I know. I can't do everything myself. I'm one person, but to delegate. And in all my careers, I've learned eventually how to delegate, and knowing that I need a team around me, and teamwork creates that change, and pointing out leaders, people who will work with you. And the last thing I would say is the visibility and giving people a voice. The best thing social media has done for us during COVID is to showcase the stories that we have, and to tell the story of the people who've been in different institutes who don't get the opportunities as that we do. So tell the stories. The Irish were very renowned for telling our scailthy and our stories, and that's what we enjoy to do as poets, as singers, as songwriters. So telling the story of that individual. So I would say to everybody, start your campaign, start your awareness programs just by telling a story.
Great stuff to end. Thank you so much to everyone on here. The panelists, thank you so much for giving your time today and for such an interesting insight. We should have had more time to get into some of these issues in more detail, but this was a great start to our conversation. I'm sure there'll be a lot of connections also following today's talk amongst yourselves and amongst the people who are here attending. I would also want to, before we leave, to tell you about the next week's talk. So I already said it's about advocacy. We'll discuss exactly how can we bring disabled people's issues to the forefront of the conversation where they should be. We'll have as our guest speakers, we'll have some people that are connected to some of these organizations already. So it seems like, again, a small world. I will just share on here the poster for next week's conversation. So we will have Kush Kanodia, who is an advocate and a social entrepreneur. He's on, he's on the board of as an advisory position in several organizations in the UK, including some of the organizations that have been present in these talks over the last month and a half. Eli Wolf, who is the director of the Power of Sport Lab in the US.
Oh no, she's frozen.
I'm frozen.
You're back.
Hello, I'm back. I don't know where you lost me, but I'll.
Yes.
So as I was saying, we have Kush Kanodia, Eli Wolf, and then Jess Markt, who is an advisor, inclusion advisor for International Committee of the Red Cross International. And he runs a lot of programs in places around the world that have been affected by conflict. And I didn't have time to include her here on the poster, but we had a last-minute confirmation, and we're very happy to have next week as well Joyce Cook, who is the Chief Social Responsibility Officer at FIFA. She will also be joining the conversation next week. So we're delighted to have these four fantastic speakers next week. Join us at the same schedule, November 23, next Monday, 6 p.m. Central European Time, 5 p.m. British Standard Time. And thanks again to everyone on our panel today and to everyone attending. We are super happy that you could join, and let's keep pushing forward and making change happen. Thank you very much, everyone.